Give me a minute. I want to respond to Paradox of Choice's comment here, who is killing it in the comments. This is the second video response to Paradox of Choice's comments today. And dude, so this is in response to the story about the Chinese military. How, according to reports coming out of China, a number of generals, as many as 9, 5 of them from the nuclear weapons program, have been detained on corruption charges. Apparently, the nuclear silos, the fuel for the rockets, was found to be water. And the assertion is that they put the money for the fuel in their pockets and filled the tanks with water. The same was true of the hydraulic fluid in the bay doors, the silo doors, which are worked by a complex automated hydraulic system that requires hydraulic fluid, which is expensive, right? It's a byproduct of oil, crude oil. And it was also found to be water, so the doors don't work. They don't open. In a nuclear emergency, or God forbid, right, if China was going to launch its nukes, it was found that they couldn't because of corruption. And I had asserted that China saw exactly what we saw with Russia, that the endemic corruption in Russia has led to this fiasco on the battlefield where Ukraine, who should have gotten rolled over 2 years ago, is holding back has pushed the Russians back off 54% of the territory that they had taken. And that Russia, after 9 years of war with every advantage, can't push past the Donbass. So there's a reason for that, and China's worried about its own readiness. So they undertook this investigation, and now these generals are in trouble. And Paradox of Choice is looking at that, says, well, wait a minute. I wonder about the same thing with Russia. Will Russia's nukes actually work? Fuel doors, maintenance, 99% of the money pocketed, not used for maintenance and upkeep. Do Russia's nukes work? We don't know. Russia's got 6,000 of them. But there are a couple things that we do know, right? Russia publishes its budget at the Ministry of Finance.ru, minfin, minfin.ru/EN for English, if you want to go take a look. And what we know about Russia's nuclear program maintenance budget is that it is 1/5 of the United States' budget. They spend $1 for every 5 that we spend. Now, it is important to recognize that back in 2014, there was a scathing report from the Pentagon that said our nuclear weapons program was in trouble. Not because of endemic corruption was not identified as the problem, but morale issues, outdated equipment, outdated maintenance schedules, etc. And so there was a big push and a big budget increase back in 2014 to make sure that everything worked. And we've been spending the money ever since. $5 for every dollar that the Russians spend. Now, here's the gig. They got about 500 nukes, more than we do, something like that. But they're spending 20% of the budget. What's one of the biggest expenses when it comes to keeping up your nukes? You gotta replace the tritium. Tritium is an isotope of hydrogen. It's got 2 neutrons and 1 proton. And it's used as kind of a fissile trigger to start the fission reaction in nuclear fission bombs and in hydrogen bombs to boost the fissionable stages. So what do we know about tritium? Well, it's got a half-life of 12.3 years. 12.3 years. That means that every 12 years, there's half as much tritium in the fissile triggers as there was at the beginning. That's a problem. You got to replace that shit. You got to make it. And that's a process that involves lithium beads and nuclear reactors. So it's not the kind of thing that you can do with your Mr. Science kit. And that's an expensive process, producing it and harvesting it and then re-injecting it into the housing. It's not like topping off the Freon in your air conditioner, but it is in a way. So paradox of choices, I have maintained that because of these facts, it is likely that Russia has no or very few working nuclear weapons. And we saw that last year. We saw the Russians screwing the warheads off of their tactical nukes and using the rocket shells to lob empty, without any explosive material in the warhead, these empty rocket shells into Ukraine in an effort to exhaust the air defenses so that the real missiles could get through. I wouldn't worry about Russia's nuclear program. If nukes are hard to maintain, they're expensive to maintain. And this government has been stealing everything it can for 30 years. We've seen the results. We've seen the results on the battlefield. Why would we think that the nuclear program was any different? And if that's the case, few to none of their nukes work. I remember the day, and I remember the day that Putin said, if you support Ukraine, I will nuke you in the West. This is not a bluff. And I literally laughed out loud. Because what's more likely? That a guy who says, I am not bluffing, is bluffing? Or that the nuclear program has been maintained when every other program has been abandoned in favor of the kleptocracy? I am not bluffing. Thanks, Paradox.